I was doing the Today Show. I was probably not even 40. And all of a sudden, I got an email that said, you should get some Botox for those deep lines on your forehead from some viewer. And I was like, shit. And I at that point, I could see that I had those lines. I had bangs for a reason, but that was when I started getting Botox. And I've been doing it ever since.
Yeah. So I love neuromodulators like Botox or Dysport. I do it twice a year. I never let the doctor do my crow's feet because I love crow's feet, and here's why. When you smile a full, what's called a Duchenne smile, you are engaging your entire face, including your eyes, which eventually, because of the muscle movement, you start to get crow's feet. I see you have them too. I love them. And I think it's important because when you smile a full Duchenne smile, you initiate a loop of feeling that goes between you and the person who's seeing you smile that generates, I think it's oxytocin or whatever that hormone is that's called the happy hormone. It's not bullshit. There's actually something that happens between people that initiates a connection. And you see in someone who's been Botoxed to death, like one of the Kardashians, when they smile or they cry, the only thing that moves is their mouth, right? I want to avoid that entirely.
Hey everyone, I'm Jean Chatzky. Thanks so much for joining me today on Her Money. So, as I think you all know, because I certainly haven't been at all quiet about it, I am going to be 60, and many of my friends are in exactly the same place, which means that we are no longer having the conversations about whether or not we need Botox, because that ship sailed a very long time ago, or even laser treatments or hydrofacials. We may get those things, but we're all well aware that it's probably time to bring out the more serious stuff if that's something that you want to do. We are having conversations about whether and when it's best to get your eyes done, and whether or not we're going to have facelifts. We look at anchors on TV, men and women, and discuss not whether or not they've had work done, but whether or not it was good work or bad work. And if it was good work, whether we know someone who knows them well enough to get the name of their doctor. Often, because these anchors are on morning TV, I have these conversations with my husband too, who of course responds as you would hope your husband might, first with an insistence that I look great, that I don't need that. And then when I push back, pointing out that when I'm on a Zoom call, I have these little folds under my chin, which, by the way, are jowls, but I hate that word, and these lines in my lips that look like I was a smoker at one point, even though I never was, and that I have to do something soon. And he looks at me, and I know he's thinking about Courtney Cox and Nicole Kidman and, oh my God, Madonna. And he says, please don't. And what he means is, please don't do something to your face that you can't take back. Look, we are a money show. We're a money show for women, and people, but mostly women, are spending a lot of money on this stuff. In 2022, annual spending on aesthetic procedures was $11.8 billion. $8.5 billion of that was on surgery. According to a survey from LendingTree, 3/4 of Americans, 75%, say beauty products, cosmetics, and services are important to them, and they spend an average of over $1,700 a year proving it. Younger generations, by the way, spend more. They spend close to $2,700. Look, I do not pay for many Substacks, but when my guest today, Val Monroe, made the argument that if she had saved me at least $40 in beauty products, I should become a paid subscriber to her Substack, which is called How Not to fuck up your face or F up your face, if we're being polite, I went for it because she has definitely saved me that much money. And she also makes me feel like my questions about procedures and products are not as insane as they feel. Val is the former beauty director at O Magazine. She's a contributor to The Cut, and she says that your beauty routine should be easy, effective, and inexpensive. And she also has opinions about those monthly facials you're treating yourself to. Val, welcome. It is so great to see you.
Hi, Jean. So nice to see you again. So glad to be here. I have two things I want to say after your lovely introduction. Can I?
Yes, please go for it.
First of all, you mentioned jowls, which everybody, over 50 basically is somewhat concerned about. A lot of my readers are concerned that they're just beginning to see jowls. And I wrote about it recently about what you can do about jowls. But one of my main points was that jowls is such a horrible word. I mean, it makes it sound like a terrible thing. And I suggest that we pronounce it like bowls. It's spelled like bowls, right? So let's call them Joels instead of jowls, because it's like a cheerier way to think about it. And also I was thinking about Sally Bowles, whose name is spelled similarly. What if we called her Sally Bowles? You get my point, right?
Joel's. I like that.
And the second thing is, when you talk about the amount of money that we spend, mostly women, spend on aesthetic procedures, whether they're in office or at home, or whether you're just talking about buying cosmetics or skincare treatment, I just want to remind readers and your listeners not to beat yourself up about spending that money, because in our culture, our beauty culture is a very, very difficult culture to deal with in general, particularly as we age. And, vanity is a very slippery slope. We're encouraged not to be vain, because then it's kind of detrimental, insulting to be called vain. But if we're not vain, if we're not concerned about our vanity, then we're told we're not taking care of ourselves. So it's a very slippery slope. I just want to say, if you're spending money on beauty, I'm not here to beat you up about it, but maybe to help you figure out how to spend a little less.
I think that's great. And I also think that there is such a range out there of things to spend our money on that it can be incredibly confusing to know sort of where to place your bets. And so I understand that we're going to spend money on this. We've done shows on beauty before. They've actually been some of our more popular shows, because I think our listeners understand, yeah, we're going to do this. We just want to be able to do it smartly. But I want to take a step back and I want to talk about your Substack for a second. First of all, the name is brilliant. But what made you after such a long career at O and other magazines, what made you decide that you were going to go in this direction?
So when I left the magazine in 2017, I left because the magazine industry, as you well know, was just basically deteriorating. And there was kind of no place for the kind of beauty writing I was doing in the magazine industry. Because Oprah is Oprah, at the magazine I had a very special place as a beauty editor, because I didn't have to attend to the advertisers in the same way for a long time, in the same way that most other beauty editors did. But as the industry started to devolve, that became more a part of what I was doing. And I found myself basically working more for the publisher than the editor, that is, trying to appease advertisers so that we could get advertising money. That didn't appeal to me at all, as Oprah was very clear that she wanted to have someone speak to readers in a way that was more honest about the beauty industry and what our options are. And then after I left, I realized that I knew a lot about the beauty industry that many people didn't know. And I thought I wanted to write a book about it. And I just started writing when I asked my Facebook family, which was about 200 people at the time, if they'd be interested in reading something called How Not to Fuck Up Your Face. About 200 people said, absolutely, yes, we would. So I started writing on this platform, Substack, and within 3 years now, I have more than 20,000 followers. So it's all word of mouth. And I think women are just very interested in how to make smart choices, because, as you say, the beauty aisles are so crowded with all kinds of things that you can either buy topically There are many things you can do, an increasingly number of things you can do in the doctor's office, and it's very, very difficult to figure out what might be right for you. Interestingly, my most recent column was about my issues with retinoid, which is a vitamin A derivative, which is the gold standard for anti-aging. I never use that word actually in my post because I don't like the idea of anti-aging, because what's the opposite of that?
Right.
I mean, right. And also, by the way, I don't like the idea of aging gracefully, because I think it's one more thing we need to make ourselves do in order to meet some kind of unrealistic standard. So I just talk about aging, living gracefully.
Your column on retinoids, it brought up a whole bunch of questions for me. And I have a list I want to go through of things that we can spend money on and whether or not we should spend money on them. But I never went down the retinoid lane, but it made me think maybe I should, although your column then made me think, well, maybe it's too late. I mean, they're not cheap.
Right. They're not cheap, but they're far less expensive than various other things you can get on them, either topically in the drugstore or luxury items you can get online that do absolutely nothing but moisturize. So as I was saying, I've always been saying, and it's true that the retinoids are the gold standard, but I interviewed a plastic surgeon who said something about not prescribing prescription retinoids to his patients over 50, which freaked me out because I'm 73. I started using them when I was 50, and I've been using them mostly off and on, but mostly on for 23 years. And so I wrote to another dermatologist, and then a few other doctors have weighed in on it. And my point is that even when you're someone as immersed in the beauty culture as I am, it's very, very difficult, very, very challenging to figure out what's right, what the right thing to do is, especially because we all have different needs. Our skin is different depending on our age, depending on the condition of our skin, because of how much sun exposure we've had. So my bottom line is, I think moderation is key. You want to keep things as simple as possible. And that's typically the message that I'm giving readers every week.
Let's talk about my list, because I actually think it's a good place to start. If you had to give a yes or no and maybe even a how much, like, is this a drugstore product or is this a doctor's office product? Answer to the following things. Good sunscreen?
Drugstore.
But it's an absolute yes, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you're going to use one product topically, sunscreen is it. So, I mean, you might want to use a cleanser, depending on the condition of your skin, a gentle non-soap cleanser, which is also a good drugstore product. I mean, you can get tons of different kinds of excellent cleansers at the drugstore, and for no more than $10 or $15. So sunscreens are a little bit more complicated. I use a drugstore sunscreen, but there are plenty of drugstore sunscreens like the Anthelio sunscreens that are excellent that you can get in the drugstore. Unfortunately, the sunscreens that you can buy in Europe or in Asia, where I often am, in Japan, are much better because of our FDA prohibits certain ingredients that would contribute to a better sunscreen formula for us. But the most important thing you can do is to put sunscreen on your face every day, rain or shine.
If you were buying one in the drugstore in the U.S., what would it be? And if you were buying one in Europe or Japan, what would it be?
So in the U.S., I use a Neutrogena sunscreen, and there's a huge number that you could choose from. And as I said, the Anthelio sunscreens are also very good. And in Europe, there's a brand called, I pronounce it Fancel. It's Fancl. I recommend that one because you can actually buy it here. Though I don't know whether the formula is different because it's sold here. But that's a very popular Fancl. It's pronounced in Japanese in a way you can't even imagine. But That's a very good one, a very light, and it's got all of the excellent ingredients. Also, Shiseido is produced in Japan, but I asked the Shiseido people if their sunscreens here were different than they are in Japan, and so far I haven't had an answer, which I think might mean that they are different.
How about a skincare routine, and how many steps do we actually need?
Yeah, so how many steps depends on how crazy you are. So if you're the kind of person who loves like the ritual of doing things to your body and your face, you can do as many as 10 steps. I mean, you can do triple cleansing if you want. The K-beauty, which is Korean beauty, is the first like trend-setting thing here that started skincare aficionados doing these wildly complicated skincare routines. Personally, my skincare routine is about 3 steps, and it's under $50. And this is what I basically recommend to readers. So I start out, for me, once a day, at the end of the day, just to wash off whatever has accumulated on my face if I've been outside, and I live in a city, so there's pollution and dust. I use a gentle non-soap cleanser, and you can get one, as I said, in the drugstore for 10 or 15 bucks. The Olay cleansers are great. Cetaphil and CeraVe make great cleansers, right? And then I still use occasionally a prescription retinoid, which costs about 60 bucks every 4 months or so. So you can do the math on that. I'm terrible at math. But I use something called Altrino, which is 0.05%. And I do notice that if my skin begins to look kind of dry, then I lay off for a couple of days or even a week or two. If you can't tolerate a retinoid, I've written about this on my Substack. There's a whole list of kinds of products you can use instead of a retinoid, like retinol or retinal, are much gentler formulas of retinoids, which you can do. You can also get over the counter, and they're not terribly expensive. So that's the treatment at night. If you need a moisturizer over that, a drugstore moisturizer is something fine to use. So that's 2 products at night, right?
Yeah. And then in the morning?
In the morning, I just rinse my face with water, and then I apply a combination moisturizer sunscreen. It's a Neutrogena product. And it's a sunscreen with retinol product that's retinol, OL, so it's not prescription, product with SPF 30. And that's it. So that's 1 product during the day, 3 products altogether. I have to say that I use a Color Science brush-on sunscreen sometimes during the day because I'm out walking around a lot. And instead of reapplying the Neutrogena or another liquid sunscreen, I find using a powder sunscreen in an SPF 50 is a good solution for me. But that's over an SPF 30 or higher if I'm at the beach, liquid sunscreen.
I love the ease of that. All right. Now we get into the pricier stuff. Botox, fillers. Where are you on these? I mean, my daughter is not even 30 and her friends are starting to get Botox. And I'm like, are you crazy? I mean, I started to get Botox. This is true. I was doing the Today Show. I was probably not even 40. And they made me grow out my bangs. They wanted to be able to see. I know. They made me grow out my bangs. They wanted to be able to see my eyes. And all of a sudden, I got an email or a letter. It might have been a letter, but that said, you should get some Botox for those deep lines on your forehead from some viewer. And I was like, shit. And at that point, I could see that I had those lines. I had bangs for a reason, but that was when I started getting Botox. I mean, and I've been doing it ever since. I still get it, even though I have the bangs. Yeah.
So I love neuromodulators like Botox or Dysport because I do it twice a year, sometimes 3 times a year, mostly twice a year. I also get in my forehead and in my bunny lines. They're called the 11s, right, that sometimes make you look angry when you're not. I never let the doctor do my crow's feet because I love crow's feet, and here's why. Crow's feet, when you smile a full, what's called a Duchenne smile, you are engaging your entire face, including your eyes, which when you smile a full smile, eventually because of the muscle movement, you start to get crow's feet. I see you have them too. I love them. And I think it's important because when you smile a full Duchenne smile, you initiate a loop of feeling that goes between you and the person who's seeing you smile that generates, I think it's oxytocin or whatever that hormone is. It's called the happy hormone. It's not bullshit. I mean, there's actually something that happens between people that initiates a connection. And you see in someone who's been Botoxed to death, like one of the Kardashians, when they smile or they cry, the only thing that moves, even if that, is their mouth, right? So I want to avoid that entirely. I think starting, the reason that some people start Botox early, I mean, 30 to me also is very early, is that when they're thinking of it as a prophylactic. So it helps to prevent the muscle movement that will eventually cause those deep lines that you found yourself looking at when you were 40. My favorite dermatologist, who I often use in my Substack, Heidi Waldorf, has said, when you see a wrinkle that doesn't go away after movement, that's when you might start to think about using a neuromodulator, which I think is very smart. But if you're just if you have no wrinkles, why?
Right. Exactly. And surprisingly to me, I mean, I've been doing this for a while, the prices have really not come down on these neuromodulators. I mean, when you go in for a treatment, you're looking at, depending on how many units they put in you, you're looking at $500, $1,000. Sometimes if I've been lazy and I haven't gone for a while, it's more than that. So it's an investment.
It is an investment, but I have to say, of all the things you might do in the doctor's office, it's one of the, I was going to say, least invasive. I mean, it is a neurotoxin, right? And it is shot into your face. So it's not exactly non-invasive, but it's one of the things that you can do that will make a bigger difference in your face than, say, as you mentioned earlier, a hydrofacial or some other kind of facial, which I'm not, basically don't really do anything except give you a temporary relaxation and maybe a temporary glow.
So the biggie, right? People start to think about surgical options. They start to think about getting their eyes done. They start to think about facelifts. I'm having these conversations. I'm actually going away with a few of my girlfriends for a couple of days in the mountains. I told them while I was talking to you, they are so excited because they know that I'm going to come back with the dirt. What's your feeling about surgery? What's your feeling about it as, I don't know, a confidence booster, but also an investment? I mean, women, we get passed over for things because we start looking old.
So there's a deeper problem with that. I mean, getting passed over for things because you start looking old, it means that there's a ageism that's happening, and that sucks, basically, and you can fight ageism after you have a facelift. It doesn't mean that you can't do what you need to do for yourself in order to work against something that you believe is wrong in the culture. But my attitude, well, first of all, personally, I've always said I'm going to wait till they have pop-off heads because the technology is moving so quickly that I think at some point, and not in the not too distant future, there's going to be some kind of stem cell advanced technology that's going to allow them to inject our own stem cells into our skin, which is going to keep it more from sagging, more tighter, more youthful looking, more vibrant. So I'm kind of waiting for that. As I said, I'm 73. So if it happens when I'm 90, if I'm lucky enough to still be around at 90, fantastic, I'll do it, right? What I say to readers about surgery is, I hope that people come to How Not to Fuck Up Your Face because it's a kind, accepting place, right? And especially in the beauty industry, those places are far and few between. Whatever gets you through the night, that's my attitude. If you believe that you will be happier because something about your face is really, really disturbing you, and I like to point out that I have about 5 friends who have had facelifts, and every one of them said they hated something about their face. Hate is a very strong word, right?
Yeah.
And I've never looked at myself and thought, I hate my jowls. I hate the bags under my eyes. I just don't hate my face enough. Okay, that leads me into something else that I think is very important. But before I get to that, I just want to say that if you have the money and you believe that it's something that will generally make you happy for yourself, then I say go for it. But remember that after surgery, you may look better or you may not look better. You may look prettier. You may not look prettier. That is a very subjective response, right? But if you're happy with the results, there's going to be a cascade of results from that. Increased self-confidence, happiness with yourself when you look in the mirror. So that's what's going to make the results of your surgery successful, not actually that you have a better face, right? So it's all, the important thing is you better be sure that you're doing this for you. The other thing I wanted to say, though, is so important is that it's really critical that before you do anything very invasive, like a facelift, or even any kind of procedure, that you learn to love your face as it is. I'm not talking about looking in the mirror and going, oh, you're so beautiful today. That shit does not work, right? It just doesn't work. But I'm talking about how to learn to see yourself, to see your face and your body, but I'm focusing on faces here, without objectification. Because when girls, mostly, the first time we look in a mirror, we're taught to objectify what we see. In other words, we're taught to treat our face and our body as an object to be evaluated, right? And adorned and manipulated, either with a smile, like, why don't you smile, right? How many times have you heard that, right? So you look prettier. Or with makeup, or invasively, eventually with surgery. And if you focus on doing an exercise, I believe, that involves learning to see your face without objectification, you learn to see your face the same way you look at the other people whose faces you love, like your mother, your sister, your girlfriends. And instead of looking at yourself in the mirror and scanning your face for flaws, which is something we're taught always to do, and we do increasingly the older we get, because there are more flaws, according to our beauty culture, to notice, right? We just see our face as a face with brown eyes or blue eyes, or ski jump nose or broad nose, or thin lips or thick, whatever. It's really important to learn to be able to see yourself without objectification. And then whatever you choose to do, you're choosing from a different platform than if you're choosing to fix yourself in the way that we're often encouraged to fix ourselves by the big beauty industry.
It's a message I think that we need to be screaming to our daughters and our granddaughters from the time that they are very, very young, because the earlier you can take that in, the earlier you can accept and learn how to do that, the better off I think you're going to be.
For sure.
I think it's hard to learn how to do in your 40s, 50s, 60s, because you've got so many miles of doing it the other way. But I do love the message. Before you make an impulse beauty purchase, you like to go through the 5 W's. Can we just talk through what they are and how to use them?
Yeah, sure. The 5 W's are the same 5 W's that I think reporters use when they're reporting a piece, which is why I thought of them. I just want listeners and my readers to remember that when you feel an impulse to buy a beauty product, the impulse is generally coming from very clever beauty marketers who are excellent experts at hitting you at your most vulnerable places, right? So there's a lot of FOMO involved in the beauty industry. They like to push the idea that there's someone out there who knows better than we do. There are people who are using a product that is better than the one we're using. Always. There's always going to be a better product than the one we're using. So the first W is, who wants me to buy this? Who says I need it? There are a lot of doctors who get behind products, but I like to encourage readers to understand that, as a dermatologist told me once, you can get a study to prove basically anything. So most products that are sold over the counter are topical products for your skin, are just really good moisturizers. What is it for? What's the product for? If a product is for, they say that the product says it's going to reduce the wrinkles in our lip lines. Well, unfortunately, that can't be done with a topical product. So if you see that someone is suggesting that a product is supposed to do something that is impossible for it to do, it's a waste of money. When and where would I use it? Well, this reminds me of the skin cleaning cleanser brush that we used to. There was a big
my God, I
fad,
had that, the Clarisonic.
Right.
Yes,
20 years
when
ago.
I was like, yeah, or more.
Right. So most people, I was very skeptical of that when it first came out, even though I love the guy who invented it. You want to think, like, how much am I going to use this thing? Is it cost effective? You know what happened with those brushes. Most of them went under the sink where they remained before you threw them out. But there are these red light masks.
That's what I was going to ask about.
Yes, right. Those don't really do anything at home. You have to use them twice a day, every day, in order to see not even probably what is a visible difference to you, So you want to be thinking, this thing is promising that it's going to reduce fine lines and wrinkles or whatever. I mean, those masks have been shown to work well on acne, I think, but on the manifestations of aging, probably not. It's a big investment. And then often you have to keep investing in the creams that you're supposed to put on before you use the mask. Big waste of money, I think, and many doctors agree. And how much do I really want it? So this how is a little W cheat. But one of your other guests talked about this in her interview, and she suggested putting something in your basket, right? Just letting it sit there overnight. And then if you still want it in the morning, then go ahead and buy it. Which I think is a terrific idea. But I think in terms of beauty products, I mean, if you're talking about something that's a small thing, like a lipstick or a blush, if you really want it and it's not expensive, then it can be, there's this thing called the lipstick fact. Buying something as small as a lipstick can like heighten your mood momentarily, right? It's a temporary effect though. So just keep in mind it's a temporary effect. And I think thinking about it a little bit, putting it in your basket and letting it sit there for 24 hours is a good idea. But for the very expensive things, I think it's an excellent idea to put it away for now and come back to it after you've done a little research.
The one that you didn't mention was who says I need it, which I think is interesting because if it's a doctor who says that you need it versus if it's a salesperson. I mean, you walk into,
or an influencer.
Or an influencer, right? But I walk into a beauty counter and I'll sit down and they'll do some stuff to my face and I'll think, ooh, I'm gonna use this, and inevitably it sits in a drawer.
So don't forget, whenever you go into a store, they're trying to sell you something. So that's their bottom line. And yeah, who says I need it? Well, I think there are many doctors online who are selling stuff. So it's very difficult to differentiate between a doctor who has your best interest in mind and a doctor who has her wallet in mind. I mean, that's just because of social media. That's just reality right now. So I would trust my own doctor. I mean, there are many doctors who have their own product lines. And a plastic surgeon I interviewed recently said most doctors' line, if you're looking at over-the-counter doctors' product lines, they're no different than other product lines you can get in the drugstore, unless the doctor has worked with a compounder or something to make special compounds that are good for particular people, right? But I mean, I think Dr. Gross, for example, he has wonderful products. I like a lot of his products, but I don't really think they're a whole lot better than other products that you can get at the drugstore. So you just don't want to be spending a huge amount of money on any products, basically, over the counter.
This has been such great advice, so eye-opening. I think it's really important before you leave us that I just point out, or you just point out, Val doesn't take freebies. She doesn't take free products.
Right.
This advice is objective because nobody is paying you to say it. And I appreciate that. And I appreciate the blog. It does make me feel better when I read it. It makes me feel like I'm not alone.
I'm so glad. And I just want to add this one last thing that I read from Ursula Le Guin, of all people, who has written about beauty. She said there is an ideal beauty, not the ideal beauty that we're used to because of our beauty culture. There is an ideal beauty that occurs not just in the body, but where the body and spirit meet and define each other. And that's what I'm talking about. That's what I want us to focus on. When I say look in the mirror and actually see yourself, do some deep listening to yourself, and you can discover that in yourself, which I think is invaluable.
Val, thank you for this so much, and thank you for sticking around and answering our listeners' questions. We asked our listeners what their beauty questions were, so we've got a special mailbag with you coming right up. We are back for our mailbag. Today we're shaking things up. Val has stuck around. She is sticking around. I don't know which is the correct tense there. But anyway, she's going to answer your beauty questions. We asked our HerMoney Facebook group what beauty questions you had. We got a bunch of great ones. If you haven't joined our Facebook group yet, what are you waiting for? There are 20,000 of you in there, and you are asking and answering money questions for each other every single day. We also do call outs for questions for the podcast newsletter, giveaways, and more. Okay, Val, you ready for the first one?
Yeah, ready.
First question today comes from Barbara, and she says, Hey, Gina and Val, how much stuff does one really need for daily skincare? The younger generation especially is obsessed with all these products. My daughter is a prime example, and it can get costly. Meanwhile, I swear by my Olay products, minimizing sun exposure, not smoking, and have yet to do injectables. Is that enough? And Val, I feel like we talked about a lot of this already, but we didn't talk about the not smoking. What does smoking do to your skin?
Oh my God. You might as well just stick your head in the toilet. I mean, I smoked for years when I was younger, and it's just terrible for your skin in every way. I mean, to use a non-medical term, ruins the circulation of your blood. If you continue to smoke, it encourages fine lines and wrinkles. And if you look at pictures of people who have smoked and those who haven't smoked, there's a huge difference. It's like looking at pictures of people who've been wearing sunscreen for their whole lives and those who haven't. It's death to your complexion, basically. So I have to say, Barbara is a terrific role model for her daughter, but I'm not sure that she's going to be able to outsmart the social media that is probably encouraging her daughter to buy all kinds of things that she not only doesn't need, but actually could be harmful to her skin at a very young age.
Like what?
Well, if say tweens are buying products with retinol in them or other AHAs, alpha hydroxy acids, or other kinds of acids, they could be harming their skin because their skin not only doesn't need it, but it could be irritating. So, these stories of young girls, tweens going into Sephora and buying all kinds of stuff they don't need. I mean, on one hand, I mean, it's a terrible cultural thing that they're being sucked into, believing all this marketing bullshit and then falling prey to it and then spending their money. But also there are issues with whether what they're buying can actually be harming their skin. So Barbara's being a great role model, but she may have to be more insistent on looking at what her daughter is using to be sure that she's not doing something that's actually harmful to her complexion.
Yeah, that's so important. Heather had a follow-up to Barbara's question. She's wondering how the products that you need, and we're talking mostly about skincare, differs by age group. When you go from your 20s to your 30s to your 40s, and I would add through menopause, how does the mix change?
Oh, yeah, don't get me started on menopause products. So I think the one thing we want to be using from the time we are 10, or as my granddaughter is 6, and she's slathered in sunscreen constantly. So sunscreen is the one thing we all want to be using throughout our lives. I can't say what each person is going to need in each decade because our skin is very different. Typically, younger women, their skin needs less moisturizer because our skin gets drier as we get older. I have to say the marketing thrust towards skincare products for women in menopause is total bullshit. I hate it. and I basically, your skin is dry. Yes, your skin does get drier. So use a good moisturizer. That will help. But the idea that there are special products made for women who are in menopause is baloney. You can do fine. You don't have to pay more for those products, in other words. But I think, once you start needing a moisturizer, first of all, a great sunscreen, a good moisturizer, a good cleanser, especially in the younger years if your skin is oily. Of course, if you have various treatment issues, like acne when you're younger, or even in your premenopausal years, sometimes that recurs, you might want to be considering special treatment products. And of course, I still recommend retinoids, even if you have to use them, if you have to, as one doctor said, pulse them, not using them regularly. But
yes, I'm calling my doctor.
Yes.
Get on that train.
Ask
Absolutely.
About that, please. Good.
Our next question is from Sandra. She says, now that we have the list of products that we should be using, what order should we be using them in? And the ones she lists are many more than you use, but serums, vitamin C, moisturizers, sunscreen, retinol. I mean, if you're going to go multi-step, I've always heard you go from lighter to heavier.
Exactly. Yeah. So you want to use the thinnest products first and the heaviest last. It's very simple. And the way you can tell whether a product is thin or heavy is you just put it in your hand and you see what the consistency is. If it's very viscous, it's heavy. If it feels like watery, then it's your lighter product. You also want to put on a treatment product first, too. So, if you're somebody who likes to use a vitamin C product, I don't, and I'm not sure that's the best thing because of simplicity. I've cut that out, but a lot of doctors recommend vitamin C because it does help reduce hyperpigmentation. It helps to further protect the skin from sun damage. I don't like the feel of those products typically because they tend to be a little tacky sometimes, but you do want to put on a treatment product first and then your makeup on top of that and sunscreen.
Finally, we've got a question from Deb, and I love this question because I am very impatient. She says, how long should you wait for results when using a new product before you know if it's working or not and before you change to a different product? For example, I'm using a nightly retinol cream. I don't see any improvement on those fine lines around my mouth. Deb, we've already established it's not going to help you with those lines around your mouth, but it is such a good question.
Yeah, it is a good question. So with retinoids, you need to wait around 6 months. So you're not going to see any improvement in your skin until after about 6 months. And there's a lot of non-compliance with retinoids because people especially prescription retinoids, because people start using them, their skin gets dry and flaky and maybe a little bit irritated, so they stop. So they never get beyond that point when it actually might have been doing some good. If that happens to you when you're using a retinoid, you hold off, wait a few nights, you're using it too often, and then try it again, maybe once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks. Sometimes you can use a moisturizer below and on top of a retinoid too in order to start to help your skin tolerate it. But I also want to say that one of the ways that the beauty industry gets us to think that products we're using is doing something for our skin is that they add something like, for example, a little tiny bit of mica or something that's going to make our skin look like it's glowing. So we put this product on our skin and it promises that it's going to make our skin glow and look more youthful or whatever. And we see this happen immediately, which for Americans is something that we like to see. It's only a cosmetic difference you're seeing. So it's not really changing your skin. It's making it look better because of something you put on it. And when you wash your face, that change is going to go away. But it's one of the ways that the beauty industry tries to trick us into thinking that a product might work immediately.
Val Monroe, you are amazing. Thank you so much for this. I know that you said you started with the idea of a book and went down the road of a Substack, but I hope maybe someday How Not to Fuck Up Your Face will become a book as well.
I'd rather stick needles in my eyes than write a book, but
okay.
All
right.
Just subscribe to the Substack, please.
Where did they do that?
So if you go to Valerie Monroe at Substack, valeriemonroe.substack.com. So it's VALERIEMONROE.substack.com. Or you can just Google how not to F up your face, and it should come up. And then you can subscribe at the low rate of $40 a year or $5 a month.
Fantastic. Thank you for spending all this time with us. I so appreciate it.
Such a pleasure, Jean. It was so much fun. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Absolutely.